Amazing waitress stuns Mafia boss with 3 unexpected words that transformed the entire restaurant. Sarah wiped down the counter, her hands trembling slightly as the door swung open. The familiar jingle of the bell echoed her unease. The regulars shifted eyes toward the entrance, and the laughter that filled the diner a moment before suddenly dulled. In walked Tony, the infamous Mafia boss, a shadow draped in an ill-fitting suit. He was a man who commanded fear like an orchestra conductor with a baton, and Sarah felt it in her bones as she straightened. The moment she approached his table, the tension thickened like storm clouds rolling in. He disregarded her with a dismissive wave, words dripping with contempt that cut deeper than she expected. "I don't want your kind of service." For a moment, her heart raced, caught between her fear for her safety and the instinct to serve. This was her diner, her family, her world. On one hand, she felt the weight of her family's financial struggles pushing her toward submission, making her want to retreat back to the comfort of smiles and eggs. But on the other, a spark of defiance flared within her. How could she let fear dictate how she treated anyone? "You're still family," she said, surprising herself. The words escaped her lips, trembling yet firm, resonating across the room like a prayer. In that instant, the air shifted. Tony's hardened expression faltered, confusion mingling with something deeper. To everyone watching, this wasn't just about her challenge to a mob boss. It unfurled layers of complicity and isolation. She felt the weight of her words settle over her, heavy like stone and yet, oddly liberating. The regulars leaned closer, intrigued by the unfolding narrative, mirroring her own internal struggle. What had she just done? The implications spun in her mind, racing alongside her breath as doubts took root. It was one thing to speak from empathy, but quite another to provoke someone whose reputation hung thick in the air like smoke. What did she have to offer compassion to a man known for betrayal? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The diner, once a place of comfort, shimmered with the potential for violence. Tony's brow furrowed, layering frustration with vulnerability. Memories of a distant family tugged at him, feelings long buried beneath his brutal life. Sarah swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet the gaze of a man who had fed fear into the hearts of others. Was empathy even possible in his world? The silence stretched, thickening with unspoken words, as each second felt like an eternity. Then, the anger in Tony simmered, the facade of control beginning to crack. He leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous, a plea eclipsed by rage. "You think you know me?" he challenged, yet something in those words trembled. For a fleeting second, Sarah saw the man behind the monster, wrestling with ghosts of past mistakes, and her heart ached with an urgency to reach him. But the fear crawled back, gnawing at her resolve. She had set something into motion, and now stood uncertain of where it would lead. As the diner expanded into a space of unraveling truths and broken families, Sarah's determination fused into something raw. This wasn't just about dinner service, this was about dignity, fragments of love and loyalty, and whether she could hold her ground in the midst of a storm. But with the stakes rising higher, she felt the overwhelming pressure building within her. She was not just a waitress anymore but a contender in a battle of lost souls. What would Tony do? Would he lash out, or could something deeper awaken within him? The horizon of hope and danger blurred, leaving Sarah straddling a line between strength and terror, praying with every fiber she had left. The future hung in the balance, suspended in a moment's breath, and she stood trembling, together with the diner at the edge of possibility. As silence enveloped the diner, Sarah's pulse quickened, each heartbeat a drumroll heralding the unfolding drama. The gaze of Tony anchored on her, his eyes stormy with confusion, resentment, and something that felt disturbingly close to longing. In that charged moment, she grappled with the realization of her newfound position not as mere staff but as an emotional catalyst in a world that thrived on intimidation. Her instinct to retreat nagged at the back of her mind, urging her to slip back into the anonymity of trays and coffee pots. Yet, she felt a magnetic pull to stay, to push against the tide of fear. "What you want," she began, voice steadier than she felt, "is a reason to remember who you are. Not who they made you." She spoke, the challenge echoing through her very soul, blending bravery with madness. The diner stood rapt, the air heavy with anticipation. Regulars exchanged glances, unspoken questions hanging in their eyes like thick fog. What was she doing? Who did she think she was? But deep down, she sensed they weren't just spectators, they were witnesses to a profound shift in her own narrative. Tony's initial fury began to falter, the flicker of vulnerability she had glimpsed now flaring brighter. "You think you can just stand there and preach to me?" He shot back, but the edge of his voice quivered. Beneath his bravado, the weight of his choices came crashing down. "People don't turn cold for no reason," Sarah pressed on. "Maybe being part of a family isn't just about blood. Maybe it's about the love that comes with it." What was she doing? Each word positioned her on a razor's edge, but the thrill of being alive in that moment fueled her resolve. As tension thickened, she saw a fleeting glimpse of something human behind Tony's hardened exterior. The flicker of his uncertainty revealed his own struggle, a man lost within his own choices. It stirred something deep within her, compassion tempered by the recognition of danger. The fine line between empathy and risk widened. "Who are you to talk about love?" He spat, but it was half-hearted, diminishing under the weight of her steady gaze. What had started as a challenge morphed into a negotiation, a battle of wills where both souls bared their vulnerabilities, if only for a moment. The tears of unspent emotions dangled in the corners of his eyes, recollections of a lost past unspooling before them. Sarah pressed on, tapping into reservoirs of courage she hadn't known existed. "Someone afraid to embrace their family," she urged softly, "because they don't want to become what they hate." Moments stretched, each one distilling the essence of a difficult truth. She felt the entire diner hold its collective breath, the wait staff, the regulars, everyone intuitively awoke to the change in the atmosphere. Suddenly, without warning, the sound of a glass shattering shattered the silence, a shard of reality cutting through their moment. The din from an overturned drink sparked chaos, breaking the spell. Eyes darted away, breaths hitching, and for the first time, Sarah felt the distance grow between her and the man she'd just begun to reach, but the damage had been done. She had initiated a shift, a glimpse of camaraderie amidst the chaos. What began as a simple wallpaper of service had pulled back to reveal the raw stitches of conflict and connection. Standing there, amidst the scattered fragments of a fallen glass, Sarah felt a fierce pride ignite. Emboldened by the fleeting connection with Tony, her mind raced. Could she do more? What if confronting fear was only the first step? The diner and its occupants lingered under a new light, the edges of her reality stretching and reshaping, but the question gnawed at her: would this moment shatter irrevocably, or could it crack open a doorway to something transformative? She took a deep breath, determination solidifying within her. The time had come for a deeper confrontation, and as she looked back towards Tony, the man full of contradictions, Sarah prepared to navigate the precarious balance of hope and danger. She needed to decide if she could challenge him again. As the chaos settled, and they locked eyes once more, the air thick with possibilities, Sarah felt the tremors of a decision waiting to unfold. Would she help him rediscover the path he had lost, or would she find herself swallowed by the dark shadows he cast? With the weight of this choice looming heavily on her shoulders, she took a tentative step forward. Sarah's heart raced, each beat resonating in her ears as she stepped forward. The air felt heavy and charged, waiting for the next move. Her instincts warred within her, fear whispered to retreat, yet something deeper pushed her on, a burgeoning sense of purpose. Tony's gaze pierced through the clamor of the diner. He was a man straddling the line between hostility and vulnerability. In that moment, she understood that she was no longer just the waitress, she was a player in this dangerous game, and she had a choice to make. "What do you want from me?" he finally said, the words laced with an edge of desperation. I want you to remember who you are, she replied, her voice sharper now. Each word felt bold, a battle cry against the shadows that clawed at the walls of his resolve. This isn't you. You're scared of what you've become. His expression faltered, and for the first time, the stiffness of his shoulders loosened slightly. That vulnerable flicker from moments earlier flashed across his face again, illuminating the good she sensed within him. Is that what you think? He asked, a sardonic half-smile curling his lips but failing to mask the tremor in his voice. You think you see the real me? I see your pain, Sarah countered, intuitively pushing forward. You're drowning in it. But you've got a choice, Tony. We all do. Holding her ground, she waited for him to respond, searching his eyes for the echo of the man she hoped still existed beneath the layers of anger and resentment. A curious silence enveloped them, drawing the entire diner's attention back. It felt surreal, here they were trapped in a moment that could erupt into chaos or catalyze profound change. Maybe you're right, he said quietly, and the weight of despair gnawed at Sarah's resolve. Was this the moment of lucidity she had hoped for? But then, he shook his head violently, dispelling that flicker of vulnerability. But you don't know me. No one does. The challenge in his voice surged again, his bravado a mask slipping momentarily. You think you can just walk in and change my life with a few words? No, she said, leaning in closer, courage igniting her words. But I can challenge you to remember what matters. You're lost in this facade, but what if you could step back? What if you could forge a life worth living again? He seemed to consider her words in a way that left both hopeful and fearful. As she stood there, Sarah felt the enormity of her own vulnerability. In those few moments, she realized that the battle wasn't just his, it was hers too. Would she have the strength to confront not only him but also the shadows that loomed over her own life? Could she risk deepening the connection, despite the danger? And as the tension hung thick in the air, a challenge rang in her thoughts: would she persist against the currents of fear and uncertainty? A sharp laugh sliced through the air, a reminder that the moment could fracture at any second. It came from one of Tony's associates, a figure lurking in the periphery, a specter of consequence cloaked in derision. Who do you think you are? What do you think you know about him? The man sneered. A chill ran down Sarah's spine, and she turned to glance at Tony, whose brow furrowed as he weighed her words against the looming danger. He seemed torn between her fierce determination and the pull of the life he had constructed, anchored by fear and loyalty to those around him. Tony, she urged quietly. This is your moment to decide. Stand with me, or let them keep you trapped. The diner's atmosphere shifted once more, the eyes of patrons flickering between the trio, many holding their collective breath as they awaited a reaction, their anxiety palpable. Sarah felt the weight of their expectations, not just as a waitress but as a catalyst of their narratives. With all eyes on him, the moment stretched between them, shaping itself into an inevitability. What would he choose? As Tony made no immediate motion, uncertainty swelled in her chest. The choice lay upon his shoulders, and whatever direction he chose, it would ripple through the life of both the diner and herself. Are you ready for what comes next? Sarah whispered, knowing she had set the stage for a decision with unforeseen consequences. And as she pondered the potential fallout, an unsettling realization bore down on her: she wasn't simply fighting for him, she was reckoning with her own demons in the process. Would they emerge together, or would one of them perhaps both be lost in the ensuing chaos? The diner's air thickened with an uneasy anticipation, as if the very walls conspired to hold its breath. Tony absorbed Sarah's challenge, visibly at war with himself. His eyes darted momentarily towards the cohort at his side, who was a loose cannon waiting for the slightest cue to pounce on this delicate scene. Her heart raced at the prospect of what came after his decision, but the urgency of the moment drove her determination deeper. Choose, Sarah said again, a whisper almost lost among the clinking dishes and subdued murmurs of the patrons. You have the power to turn this around. A contemplative pause responded, a deafening silence that felt like it could be cut with a knife. She felt the weight of it pressing down, nearly suffocating, yet there was something exhilarating in that tension and undercurrent of potential. This was what she craved, the opportunity not merely to wait tables but to alter lives. That he shifted slightly, the hesitation in his stance hinting at an inner conflict that played out against the backdrop of towering expectations. She had extended herself into his turmoil, yet she realized that her own spirit was laid bare, too. In attempting to illuminate his struggles, she confronted her own, a life molded by the complacency of routine and the fear of vulnerability. Just as her thoughts threatened to spiral, Tony's brow steadied, resolve momentarily flickering to life. "You don't get it," he finally said, voice thick. "What you're asking could cost me everything." The warning rolled off his tongue like lead, heavy but laden with unspoken truths. "And what are you giving up if you stay in this life?" She countered, the words spilling forth in a rush, spurred by the energy swirling between them. "You think hiding brings safety, but it only builds cages. The only thing that's guaranteed is your emptiness. Fight against it." She noticed the twinge of conflict in his jaw, a tightening as if he recognized the truth in her words but was reluctant to admit it. The associate standing menacingly beside him shifted impatiently, the tension sharpening like a knife's edge. Sarah's stomach knotted at the thought of him intervening, but her focus remained firmly on Tony, the man who stood between darkness and the glimmer of a path to redemption. Maybe Tony trailed off, sounding small in the overwhelming room filled with eager, prickly energy. In that moment of ambivalence caught between his loyalty and what could be, Sarah spotted a flicker of potential awakening. She sensed a brave decision poised to break free, but an undercurrent of terror still kept him anchored. As her conviction solidified, Sarah took a step closer, her voice a gentle coaxing thread weaving through the tense silence. "You must be tired of pretending, Tony. It's exhausting to keep up this facade. Let us be real together, whatever that means." Her sincerity was apparent. She was laying her own cards on the table with a transparency that felt both liberating and terrifying. If he chose to step into the light, there was no certainty she wouldn't stumble under the weight of that partnership, yet the potential for growth propelled her forward. Across the booth, the associate snorted, his laugh mocking the gravity of the moment. "This is a joke. You think you can talk sense into a man like him?" A surge of anger welled in Sarah, but she diverted it back towards Tony, grounding herself in the pursuit of truth. "He is more than this. You are more than what they label you. Fight for who you can become." In his gaze, she saw the shadows of past setbacks, the ghosts of a troubled past that clung to him like a heavy cloak. They weren't just his battles, they were hers too. She felt her walls trembling, crackling with the adrenaline of vulnerability. As Tony searched her eyes, the distant sound of sirens wailed in the background, offering a chilling reminder of the peril that accompanied them both. They stood on an edge, and all it would take was one misstep, one lack of clarity or courage before everything erupted into chaos. "Are you really going to risk it all for this?" Tony challenged, the underlying fear evident behind his bravado. "Isn't risking it all worth potentially losing nothing?" She found herself countering instinctively, and in that moment, she was astounded at her own bravery. There was no way to chart her path ahead, but perhaps the point was not to plot a course but to be present, regardless of the uncertainty. And in the depths of that shared turmoil, a rare flicker of understanding flashed across Tony's face. The intrigue thickened, a gutting truth coursing through her. They were two intertwining souls on the brink of transformation, but would they take the leap together? Before he could respond, the associate leaned in, very much aware of the shift in energy. "This is your last chance, Tony. You know what's at stake." "Game on." Sarah felt the stakes crystallize, a rapid heartbeat drumming a deafening rhythm in her ears. This was more than a moment, it had become a test of heart, soul, and aspirations. The cliff before them, a sweeping abyss, a labyrinth they could either navigate hand in hand, or fall into together. And as she met his penetrating gaze, she sensed that this rendezvous could either redefine everything for them both, or shatter into irrelevance. One step remained. Would he dare? Just then, a sudden crash echoed from the back, as someone toppled over a table. The peripheral chaos drew everyone's attention, hearts pounding anew. This was at the moment. Would courage steer their path, or would fear drive them apart? The crash of the table echoed through the diner, the sound sharp against the tide of chaotic tension that had enveloped the room. Distracted, patrons turned in unison, their conversations faltering. Sarah's gut twisted. This was the distraction that could divide their moment of choice, pushing Tony back into the shadows. "Tony, focus. We're still here," she pressed, needing him to pull from the gravity of the moment rather than recoil. But he shifted, unease rippling across his features. His associate smirked, relishing the discord, her mere presence looming like an ominous weight. "Do you really think you can change anything?" The associate spat, startling her. "You're just a waitress, trying to reason with a man who is too deep in the coils of failure to care. What makes you think he gives a damn about an ultimatum?" The words sliced through Sarah, but she refused to flinch. Instead, anger sparked within her not at Tony, but at the associate, who represented everything Sarah despised. Change isn't built from complacency, it demands action, Tony. Your life is just as valuable as any reputation or designation. Don't let this moment fester into inaction. It was a revelation. In defending Tony, she had found a fierce conviction within herself. No longer merely asking him to leap, she recognized a parallel struggle they both faced, a desire to emerge from the confines of their lives. Tony's body language shifted again, indecision freezing him in place, but sparks of defiance lit his gaze. "It's not about worth," he murmured, almost to himself. "It's about loyalty. What would my crew think if I turned my back on everything? Would they respect you for living a life confined to fear? Or would they admire you for breaking free?" She urged, her heart pounding in her chest. "You owe yourself at least that much." But her words danced precariously close to the edge of desperation, entwined with fear that any miscalculation could reduce everything to mere whispering echoes. She sensed the hollow longing inside him to choose life instead of survival, but the chains of expectation weighed heavily on his spirit. In that brief silence, she glimpsed a man at war with himself, the shattering internal conflict painted starkly across his face. It reminded her all too clearly of her own battles, the days and nights spent wandering in stagnation, the moments when passing time enwrapped her in a cocoon that stifled her dreams. Suddenly, the diner seemed less like a battleground than a sanctuary, a haven where souls dared to spill their truths without pretense. The remnants of distraction faded, and the sirens outside dulled to a muted whisper, as if the universe leaned in, listening. "Loyalty should never be blind," she said, her voice steady. "Let it guide you toward authenticity, not shackles. You have the chance to forge a new identity." She was astonished at her own clarity, her words taking flight with genuine conviction. Tony's eyes flickered with something more than fear. There was a spark of recognition beginning to coalesce into resolve. "What if they choose differently? What if I lose everything I've built? Then you build anew. It's about who you become in the process, not what you leave behind. Let the chips fall where they may." For a fleeting moment, she felt emboldened by the vulnerability she shared, knowing that they could soar if they daringly embraced their uncertainties together. He hesitated, considering, weighing choices clamoring for his attention. The associate's finger tapped impatiently against the table, an aggravating reminder of the stakes, yet Sarah also knew that every pause, every second of reckoning, was a chance to step into the light or remain in the dark. Suddenly, the energy in the diner shifted, a palpable hum igniting in the wake of their conversation. The mundane became extraordinary, a mere waitress standing up for what she believed in, suggesting a far more expansive narrative than anyone could have predicted. "Tony," she whispered, "what if you found your voice?" Then a shattering realization gripped her, a thought that was a paradigm shift. He was not just making a choice for himself, but for her, too. They were both standing on the precipice of transformation, not only battling their individual fears but forming an alliance. The fates themselves trembled at the edges of possibility. Would he take the step, propelled by her courage? Or would the fleeting moment slip through their fingers, leaving behind nothing but ghostly echoes of what could have been? As the tension warped and twisted around them, Sarah saw the fissures of hope begin to widen. The waitress within could become more than a job title. she could facilitate change not only for herself but for him, and by extension, for anyone willing to break away from the shadows. "Are you ready to find out?" She breathed, sealing the air around them with the weight of her question. Tony met her gaze, and what she saw there sent a shiver of anticipation down her spine. The dawn of a new decision loomed heavy against the horizon. Before he could answer, the diner door swung open, and in walked a figure that could alter everything yet again, a sharp outline against the backdrop of flickering neon lights. The door creaked open, and an abrupt hush fell over the diner as the figure entered. Dressed in sharp, tailored clothing, the newcomer radiated an air of authority that sent an electrified ripple through the crowd. Sarah felt her heart quicken, but the intensity of her gaze locked onto Tony. The realization dawned upon her: this could either be the catalyst for his new beginning or a return to the very depths he was trying to escape. As the figure approached, Sarah focused on Tony's expression, a kaleidoscope of recognition, fear, and something dangerously akin to nostalgia. She couldn't afford to let his moment waver now, not when she had peered into the depths of his potential. "Stay with me, Tony," she whispered, her breath steady despite the turbulence swirling around them. Tony swallowed hard, the conflict festered visibly. In that moment, he was no longer just a man caught in a web of loyalty, he was at a crossroads where risk and opportunity intermingled. The figure glided past tables where diners held their breath, each gaze fixed on the unfolding drama. "Tony," the figure called out, voice smooth and commanding. "I thought you'd be back for dinner. We have business to discuss." With each syllable, the gravity of the moment deepened. It was a challenge, a beckoning back into a world that demanded fealty over freedom. Sarah's heart raced. She needed to cut through the tension that had rewrapped itself around Tony like an anaconda. "You don't owe him anything," she said, interception sharpening her voice. "Your worth isn't defined by what he dictates." The figure turned to Sarah, assessing her with a calculating gaze that seemed to dissect her worth in the blink of an eye. "And who is she, Tony? Your new voice?" There was a smirk, a challenge that fueled her resolve. This was a test, not just for Tony but for her too, a stark reminder that standing up for what they both desired required confrontation. "Maybe she is," Tony murmured, surprising even himself, a hint of a rebellious spark kindling anew. But insecurity flickered behind his resolve. He doubted whether that voice would carry weight against the tempest of his past. "Think of your crew," the figure pressed, leaning into the conversation. "Are you really willing to throw away everything you've built, step into the unknown just because of her?" It was that brutal dilemma which ignited a fire within Sarah. Here stood two paths, one lined with chains that defined a man's potential through obligation and fear, and the other shimmering with uncertain possibilities but a guarantee of self-discovery. "Your crew," she echoed, drawing upon her confidence. "What do they know about your dreams, your aspirations? Do they see you as simply what you've built, or as the man you aspire to be? Freedom isn't built on loyalty that binds you, it's on courage to choose for yourself." Each word carved a space into the thick atmosphere, forcing even the figure to flinch. Tony's conflict rippled through him, yet her words struck deep, igniting a gossamer web of thoughts. Who am I without these expectations? The diner had morphed into a crucible, a place of transformation, fraught with both risk and ridiculous potential. The tension hung palpably, but it was the vulnerable harmony of potential that resonated through Sarah. She could feel the daring energy shift. The unspoken power of possibility blossomed humbly as she stood beside Tony, no longer just a waitress advocating for a man's awakening but of her own as well. "Are you ready to seize this chance, Tony? Or will moments slip through our fingers, suffocated by fear?" She breathed, throat dry with anticipation. The figure took a step forward, tension building like a taut string ready to snap. As Tony locked eyes with Sarah, it felt as if the air crackled around them, a partnership forged in adversity, a glimpse into two souls claiming autonomy. But as Tony opened his mouth, the world held its breath for a reason neither could ignore. The moment of truth was not just now unfolding, it was poised to shatter the silence lingering in their hearts. Would he echo her strength, claiming his identity, or would they both succumb to the heavy shadows of fear that loomed just behind them? The weight of the diner's stillness pressed in as they stood at the edge, ready for decisions that would forever alter the outline of their lives. The air crackled with unspoken words, as Tony's lips parted, hesitation written across his brow. The figure, his back straight and unyielding, seemed to feed on the frailty of the moment, a predator waiting to pounce. Sarah felt her pulse quicken, anchoring herself next to Tony, projecting a sense of stability amid the rising tide of uncertainty. "Just say it, Tony," she urged, pulling from the depth of his internal struggle. "This is your moment." With that, the gaze of the diners shifted, every ear tuned into the confrontation. Tony was no longer just Tony, he was the embodiment of choice, poised between a past that loomed heavy and a future that shimmered with possibility, however vague. He met Sarah's eyes, recognizing in her encouragement the reflection of his own potential. The slightest tremor of resolve sparked in his core, perhaps it was time to challenge the life that was force-fed to him. He began. "Enough of this," the figure interjected, a quick lunge forward as if to snatch the momentum back. "You cannot be serious, Tony. Are you really about to let her talk you out of everything you've worked for? Your obligations?" But Tony held steadfast against the rising tide of manipulation. The conflicts within him shifted, anxiety fading under the weight of Sarah's unwavering support. She had laid bare the path of choice before him, a choice not just between two lives but between two versions of himself. The feelings that had festered within him were now a tangible, gnawing presence begging for attention. "Obligations?" he repeated, testing the word on his tongue. "Is that what you think they are?" He could feel the room's breath held, watching the seismic shift unfold. "I've been drowning in obligations masquerading as loyalty." The figure's confident demeanor faltered momentarily. "You're throwing away your place, your power for moments of whimsy." "That power is a gilded cage," Tony pressed, steadying himself against the image of a future unshackled. "Moments? No, this isn't whimsy. It's me reclaiming my path." A murmur rippled through the diner, the gravity of his declaration resonating with an audience straddling the line between fear and awe. Sarah found her breath steadying in her chest. It wasn't just Tony's liberation, it was a mutual awakening. "You deserve more than this, Tony. You were never defined by what others wanted you to be," she added, her voice a steady beacon that echoed the fierce resolve building within them both. In that pivotal instant, the figure's frustration morphed into something more sinister, a taut line that hinted at potential repercussions. "You think you can simply walk away? The consequences of your actions will reach well beyond this moment, both of you." Tony squared his shoulders, feeling an unfamiliar strength surge within him. "We haven't even begun to explore those consequences." That phrase hung in the air, a catalyst for the unknown. Coming out of shadows meant risking the light, but he no longer felt burdened by fear. Instead, a weightless exhilaration enveloped him. He had come to understand that his true power lay not in obligations but in the willingness to face the repercussions of his decisions. That as silence fell heavy, punctuated only by the distant clatter of dishes, a new reality crept into existence. The figure's piercing gaze danced between them, assessing, recalibrating strategy, a momentary flicker of uncertainty marking his expression. "That's brave of you, Tony," the figure finally said, voice laden with skepticism. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Tony retorted, finding clarity in the chaos. "It's choosing to act in spite of it." Sarah's heart soared in unison with his resolve. Together, they were beginning to unravel not just Tony's boundaries but the way they both perceived their own worth. And just as the atmosphere ignited with the lingering embers of their newfound strength, a thought-stirring realization whispered to her. Perhaps they weren't merely facing a decision, they were on the brink of a transformation that could shatter the very foundations of their existence. "So, what do you intend to do now?" the figure challenged, leaning in. Tony's smile was slow, deliberate. "We'll chart a course forward together." The implications of what he meant stood starkly in the air as the diner braced itself for the weight of change. The promise laced within that moment, where choice intersected with courage, rippled like a shockwave through the crowd, igniting a firestorm of uncertainty around the figure, and yet, a lingering echo chased them. Would this newfound partnership withstand the storm brewing on the horizon? The stakes were far from settled. Would Tony's gamble be their salvation, or would they find themselves ensnared in a darker fate? Only their next steps would unveil the truth. The moment hung suspended in the air, a fragile tapestry of uncertainty woven with threads of anticipation and resolve. Tony could feel the stage of the diner shift beneath him. It was more than just a physical place, it was a crucible for his awakening, the backdrop to a confrontation that was not just with the figure but within himself. "What do you mean, together?" The figure demanded, his tone laced with incredulity, defiance crackling like static. The ambient noise of the diner faded into a dull hum, leaving only their confrontation stark and raw. Tony felt Sarah's hand reach for his, their fingers intertwining a grounding force amid the chaos. He dared to look at her, drawing strength from the fearless glimmer in her eyes. It was a reminder that he wasn't merely acting on his whims, he was claiming agency over his life, forging a path that had long been obscured. "Together means that we face the consequences of this choice as partners," Tony stated, the words firming around a central truth he was finally ready to embrace. The figure's posture stiffened as if caught in a vice grip of disbelief. It struck Tony then this wasn't merely a confrontation, it was an opportunity to dismantle a narrative that had held him captive. "I'll no longer be your pawn," Tony continued, focusing on the figure while feeling the tremor of nervous energy trying to curl back into his stomach. "Loyalty doesn't mean living in someone else's shadow. I want to create a life we define for ourselves." The figure's face twisted into a mask of fury and disbelief, but Tony didn't waver. He was peeling back the layers of himself that had been buried under expectations and obligations. Each word spoken was an act of reclamation. He could hear the quiet gasps from the diner's stave-off surprise and trepidation, yet attraction to the unfolding drama. "Life isn't a script dictated by others," he shot back, a sudden clarity rushing through him. "It's the choices we make day by day that carve our path." He felt the collective focus sharpen, a raw energy thrumming through the air. It was infectious, a burgeoning pulse lifting confidence within him. The figure, rattled, responded with an edge of menace in his voice. "And what makes you think you can keep those choices? Do you think leaving will have no repercussions? Your actions will draw lines in the sand that can't be erased." "I'm prepared for that," Tony declared, aware that with every confrontation came risks. Stepping into the unknown felt like standing at a precipice, the world below offering terrifying heights. A moment that now teetered on the edge of possibility. Turning to Sarah, he saw that she mirrored his resolve. Together, they were 2 points of light against an encroaching darkness. "We'll navigate whatever comes next," he reassured her, embedding the truth into their shared space. "I won't run from the consequences anymore, I'll confront them head-on." This acceptance was foreign and exhilarating in equal measure. It felt less like an ending and more like the opening of a door they had never considered before. Within the diner, murmurs intensified, swaying between admiration and concern. For the first time, he felt the stirrings of doubt within the figure, a hint of uncertainty breaking through the facade of control. Unraveling the power dynamic shifted the energy, igniting hope in Tony's chest. He was more than just a character in someone else's story, he was the protagonist of his own, but the comfort of his resolve ignited an unsettling realization. Would this newfound strength last against the brewing storm? As they steadied themselves for the fallout of the confrontation ahead, a chilling thought sneaked into Tony's mind. This struggle wasn't just external, it would seep into every corner of their lives, testing principles and loyalty in harrowing ways. Amid a blink of silence, the figure leaned closer, darkness curling into a sly smile. "Then let us see how deep your bravado reaches when it's put to the test." As the weight of that challenge throbbed in the air, Tony braced himself for the impending conflict, a sudden mix of anticipation and dread igniting within. The stakes had risen, and the true test of their alliance was on the horizon. Each moment stretching taut like a bowstring poised to unleash their next move would reveal the full extent of their resolve. How would they navigate the trials ahead, and could they emerge unscathed from the shadows looming dangerously close? The figure's laughter cut through the tension like a knife, each chuckle soaked in disbelief, escalating the atmosphere in the diner to a fever pitch. Tony could practically feel the weight of every stare pressing against him. He had just committed to a path of resistance, yet a part of him clenched with doubt. He had always been the reliable son, the obedient employee. Shifting the narrative script felt monumental. Go ahead, then, the figure taunted. Let us see how strong your bond really is when life throws real challenges your way. Your little rebellion is cute, but the world doesn't bend to your desires. Tony swallowed hard, anger bubbling beneath the surface. But the anger wasn't at the figure, it was at himself, a nagging feeling of inadequacy creeping back in, whispering that maybe he wasn't strong enough to face the repercussions. His heart raced, but he steadied his breathing, focusing on the strength emanating from Sarah's grasp. Trust that we'll handle it, he said, forcing confidence into his voice. You think you know my limits, but you don't. We're reimagining our future, and that's not something you can control. The figure's demeanor hardened, and Tony sensed the real battle lay ahead. This wasn't just a clash for control over his choices, it was a lasting commitment to define who Tony could become. As the figure retreated, the familiar din of the diner returned, but it was now layered with hushed conversations, reflecting the weight of what had just transpired. Yet, alongside the undeniable sense of purpose, Tony was also grappling with the first tremors of fear. What did he really know about standing up to a figure that had commanded so much of his life? Despite feeling liberated, shadows of doubt coiled around him. What if all this resolve crumbled at the first challenge? Let's talk strategy, Sarah said, her voice cutting through his spiraling thoughts. She leaned closer, her gaze intent. If we're going to make this work, we need a plan. You've made your declaration, but there's more to it than words. He felt the urge to recoil from the reality of planning, yet her steady intentions grounded him. If he was to forge this new path, they had to anticipate obstacles. You're right. I need to find ways to re-establish control without alienating the people who still mean something to me, Tony murmured, his thoughts brewing with possibility. First, let's consider how to build our own support, outside this environment, Sarah suggested. Who do you trust? Tony's mind raced through the faces that populated his life. Friends? Colleagues? They had their roles, dominating his view of loyalty. Developing a team wasn't just about assembling allies, it was about re-evaluating existing connections, redefining the narrative around every single one. That he took a deep breath. I have to be honest with them. This isn't just about me anymore. This is about crafting a life worth living. The more they understand who I am now, the more support I can rally. I can't be afraid of how they'll react. The nerve still fluttered in his gut, but a sense of clarity began to replace the chaos. Once the figure tested their resolve, Tony would be ready, not just in spirit but with a plan in motion. As the two strategized, he felt bolstered by the potential within their discussion. The diner, once a mere setting for a confrontation, transformed into a base for action. Yet another unsettling realization tickled the edge of his consciousness. Would their relationship withstand the inevitable tides of change? Would each challenge fray their bond or reinforce the foundation they were building? Suddenly, he caught sight of the figure once more across the diner, now engaged in conversation, an undercurrent of danger swirling in his mannerisms. Tony's pulse quickened. Do you think you will strike back soon? Tony asked, an urgency creeping into his voice. Eventually, Sarah replied, her brow furrowing in thought. But we can outsmart him. The real question is whether we're prepared to face him together. The answer reverberated within him. This was their turning point. The solidarity of their bond had never felt so vital, but the impending storm loomed ahead. Each moment counted now, and there was no going back. With a deep breath, they prepared to forge a path forward, but as uncertainty tightened its grip, Tony couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and the next confrontation was just around the corner. Would their united front withstand the ensuing battle? The clock was ticking, and the time for action was nearing. As dawn broke over the diner, bathed in warm golden light, Tony sat across from Sarah, a quiet strength enveloping them both. The remnants of the night before hung in the air like mist, imbued with potential and uncertainty. Together, They had taken a stand against fear, but it was now time to put words into action. "Today is the day we put everything on the line," Tony declared, a steeliness gleaming in his eyes. He felt an assurance rising within him, unfurling like a flag of independence instead of a shackle born of loyalty. Sarah nodded, her determination matching his fervor. "We'll start with those closest to you," she suggested, laying out the plan with a precision reflective of her newfound confidence. "We need to gather friends who understand your struggle, people who value you for who you are, not just the role you've played." Tony took a deep breath, reflecting on the bonds that had started to feel more like chains. "Robert has been with me from the beginning in this business. If anyone would understand, it's him." "Let us set the meeting then," Sarah encouraged. "This is your opportunity to define what real loyalty means in your life, surrounding yourself with those who support your vision moving forward." For the first time in forever, Tony felt the weight of expectation lifting. The drive to reclaim his freedom transformed into a palpable energy, buoyed by Sarah's unwavering presence. Each step forward became an echo of personal reclamation, expanding his sense of self. Hours ticked away as they planned, sharpened by anticipation. The diner gleamed with promise as regulars shuffled in, blissfully unaware of the tremors of change brewing beneath the surface. Each clink of silverware, every murmur felt like threads tightening in a tapestry of possibility woven together. By the time Robert arrived, Tony's heart raced anew. Standing in the diner's doorway, he looked out of place in his usual crisp business jacket but remained a friend haunted by familiar shadows. "Tony." Robert greeted, confusion etching his features. "What's this all about? You seemed different yesterday." The rush of adrenaline pushed Tony forward. Here was his chance. "I want to talk about the future, my future. The one I want to own, not the one assigned to me." His voice trembled, not with fear, but with truth. "What do you mean?" Robert pressed, his brows knitting together in suspicion. "Things can't stay the same. I'm done hiding. Too long, I've let my choices be dictated by loyalty to a crew that doesn't have my best interests. It's time to forge something real." Robert's frown deepened, the tension palpable. "You're talking about leaving this life?" "I'm talking about reclaiming myself," Tony stated, meeting his friend's gaze unflinchingly. "I want to build my own path, surrounding myself with those who understand the weight of our choices." He flicked a glance at Sarah, feeling her presence radiate support. "I'm not alone in this. And it starts here today. Will you join me?" The two men locked eyes, searching for something within that shared history, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. "What will that mean for us? Do you understand the risks you're taking?" Robert's voice softened, a quiet plea tinged with concern. "More than ever," Tony answered, raw honesty gripping his heart. "But the risk of staying stagnant is greater than the fear of losing what I've built. I'm ready to become who I truly am." The decision hung in the air, suspended on a thread of loyalty frayed by time and doubt. A deep silence blanketed the diner as others around them noticed the intensity of the moment. Finally, Robert pinched the bridge of his nose, a sign of contemplation. "I've always respected you, Tony. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried. But if this is what you truly want, then I'm with you. I've been waiting for you to find your voice again." Relief washed over Tony, the weight he had been carrying lightening at last. "Thank you, Robert. With you by my side, I can fight." Their partnership was born anew, infused with clarity. Sarah smiled at Tony, a shared victory swelling within. The trio. As the sun shined brighter, illuminating the diner, the weight of fear dissipated into the air. It dawned on Tony that change was not born from a single choice, it was laid brick by brick. Each empowered decision was a chance to redefine not just his life, but to uplift those around him. Empowered, he realized he had not only confronted his past, he was stepping into an unprecedented future. This courage ignited a fire within him, one that promised to forge connections that would flourish in authenticity. "What's next?" Robert asked, his brow lifting in anticipation. Next, we extend this network of support, Tony replied, his eyes twinkling with possibility. We reach out to others, inspire them to reclaim their voice. It's time to break the cycle. And so, in that diner that had once felt like his prison, victory emerged, a powerful moment marked not by a single act, but by a series of courageous decisions, reflecting genuine growth. With newfound allies, they embarked on a shared journey toward transformation. Together, Tony, Sarah, and Robert stepped into the world ready to untangle the webs of their past, confident in the promise of a future they could define on their own terms. This was the moment of their liberation, a promise sealed with determination, ushering in an era not just for survival, but for flourishing together, unmarred by fear. Before the day unfolded beyond the diner, one last reminder lingered in the air. The lessons learned were not meant to be kept secret, they were meant to inspire. So, if you felt the tug of transformation within your own life, don't wait even one more second to share your journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread this message. Comment below with your thoughts, insights, and theories about the impactful choices we face. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this call to transformation, because true growth ignites when shared. Your support makes a difference.